Hello, SEC Bias Nation. Shelby's not with me tonight, so would be flying solo. But for our special edition, we're going to be talking about some HBCU football, particularly some Deion Sanders, Ed Reed, catching up with what's going on in that HBCU side of the world. I got to handle my kid real quick. So I got a special guest with me, Mr. Brown.
Hey,
Welcome to the show, Mr. Brown.
what's going on, Ethan? What's up, SEC Bias Nation? How y'all doing?
All right. So you want to give us a quick intro?
Man, you know what? Hey, I'm Lawrence Brown. I'm a sports fan at heart. I'm actually a SEC fan at heart. But I am a black college football fan first. I grew up in a household that really got behind, Florida A&M University. So as a kid, I traveled to all of the big games. The Orange Blossom Classic, the Florida Classic, Southern, Grambling, Jackson State, Alabama State. So I'm accustomed to being around black college football. But so I always say that I'm a FAMU fan, and then secondary I'm an Alabama fan.
Oh Lord.
So yeah, so that's where I'm at with it, man. But I'm excited to be here for your special edition and to have a conversation about HBCU football. And it's a lot of headlines, man. It's a lot of headlines, from Deion Sanders, and this week we have Ed Reed. So it's a lot to talk about.
Yes, sir. We were going to do this last month. Life gets in the way. Now we've waited long enough that we have another headline that we can talk about.
Yeah.
So real quick, pretty good segue there. So I just want to throw up a little graph I put together.
Okay.
So some fast facts here for people who may not be as familiar with HBCU as yourself. One thing that I kind of found interesting, and it's something that we had on our notes, the national championship for HBCU. I was under the impression that the Celebration Bowl was the national championship for HBCU. When I started digging into this for our show here, I learned that that's just between the SWAC and the MEAC. And digging in through the history of all this was really interesting to me. And I thought about this when I was riding home on my Facebook blurb. I put, what is SWAC, or you're going to teach me what being SWAC means. And I realized, oh, damn, fam using the MEAC.
No, we had actually we were in the MEAC, right? We were in the MEAC up until 2 years ago, and then we came over to the SWAC. I mean, it happened during the time when we had all the crazy realignment at the FBS level. And just like everybody else, Florida M, began to look at a strategic plan of how it wanted to see its football program play out. The MEAC was, we found out that the MEAC just wasn't as profitable as being in the SWAC. There was a lot of other things, in terms of, in the MEAC, for a time, FAMU was the big fish in the pond. And so, we would travel to other stadiums and we would pack out their stadium. But when it was time for them to come to Tallahassee, we didn't really get the same type of love. Also, there was a lot of, in my opinion, some boring matchups, right? Nobody wants to see, at least I didn't want to see FAMU versus Howard. I didn't want to see FAMU versus, Morgan State or Delaware State. So the rivalry just wasn't there outside of Bethune-Cookman, North Carolina A&T, South Carolina State. But when you you put us over in the SWAC, where a lot of our natural rivals are, and we can kind of get into that too. So when you look at Southern, when you look at Grambling, Jackson State, Alabama State, you look at those schools, Alcorn, those are some of our natural rivals because HBCUs have kind of went through some transition, and this is why you can't really. There's so much debate about a true HBCU national champion. Most HBCUs up until the 1970s and 80s were Division II, right? They were in the conference, the CISC conference, which where a lot of those schools were at, and so that's where a lot of these rivalries actually began. But eventually, we moved up to what was called the 1AA, which is now FCS level. Some of the schools stayed, like Tuskegee, Albany State, Fort Valley State, and then a lot of schools came up: Tennessee State, FAMU, Grambling. Everyone that's in the SWAT. And the reason that there's so much kind of talk about who's really the real HBCU champ is because most of the HBCUs play at different levels. I consider the SWAT the Celebration Bowl. I consider it to be the championship because obviously it's at the highest level in the FCS level. Everybody else is Division II. So I consider it to be that because there's only two FCS HBCU conferences, which is which is the MEAC and the SWAT.
Okay, so I didn't know that. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So I saw something. So you see here on our graphic, Tennessee State, they have the most national championships. However we want to cut it. So the Ohio Valley Conference, it looks like that's in FCS as well.
That's FCS. That's not an HBCU conference though.
But okay, Tennessee State is an HBCU, right?
Tennessee State is an HBCU.
So they are the. I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep interrupting you.
No, it's cool.
I'd come across something, and it was in relation to the Celebration Bowl, because Tennessee State had been arguably one of, if not the most successful HBCUs in terms of football, at least one of the top 5 or so, top 10 from what I was reading. And since they joined the Ohio Valley Conference, they've really had a lot of issues, and so that was they have not been nearly as successful since leaving. I'm not sure if it was a SWAC or MEAC, but since they joined that conference, and it's one of the things that sort of reinvigorated the tie-in for the Celebration Bowl for the SWAC and the MEAC, so that you could have the two HBCU conferences that are made up exclusively of HBCUs playing each other. Right. And that's one of the things that I kind of wanted to talk about was, as it stands now, do SWAC and MEAC teams go to the FCS playoffs?
No. So nobody has up until the Celebration Bowl, Ethan. Up until the Celebration Bowl was implemented, I'm thinking that was probably 5 or 6 years ago. The MEAC had an automatic bid for the Celebration Bowl. I'm sorry, for the FCS playoff. But when we went to the Celebration Bowl, we gave that up, to play in the Celebration Bowl. The SWAC has never, to my knowledge, had a automatic bid to the FCS playoffs.
Gotcha. So, what you were my coach in high school, right? I know you believe in iron sharpens iron.
Right.
Would you prefer to have a definitive Celebration Bowl where it's the best HBCU team in the country and you can crown them every year? Or would you prefer for those teams to go and play a wider FCS field and be able to say we are the best FCS team in the country?
You know what? There was a time, and another point, and the first FCS championship was played in 1978 in Florida A&M University under the leadership of our legendary coach Ruby Hubbard. Florida A&M University was the first FCS champion in 1978, right? To this date, obviously no other HBCU has won that crown. In the early 1990s into the early 2000s, before you was born, right? FAMU was a force in the FCS, right? I'm talking about we talking about the Georgia Southerns, we talking about the Appalachian States, we talking about the Troys. Like, these were battles that you just had to be there to see all these great schools. Youngtown State, a lot of the most dominant FCS programs during that time period, and some of those schools obviously have moved on to the FBS level. But in the '90s, we were right there. We were right there. We always went deep in the playoffs. At the time, that was what the prestige was, right? It was prestigious to go to the FCS playoff and to beat all these great teams and these large schools and to say that you were one of the best, right? But I think that the football model, the model for football has changed drastically, and it's not so much about bragging rights, right? It's about making money. And so, if you know anything about the FCS playoffs, schools actually lose money playing in the FCS playoff. Is it James Madison that just moved up from?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was reading an article about them, and they was talking about how they would spend, over $1 million a year just to play in the playoffs. Because what people don't really understand about the playoffs is that the NCAA, actually takes money from the schools, right? You have to put in a bid to go to these places, and if you don't break even, you lose money. It's not always a regional fit. So now you got to fly students, you got to feed students, you got to do that. So it's really more expensive, right? Whereas that if you go to the Celebration Bowl, that's 1.5 million per team, right? So you do the math. At the end of the day, if I was on the road recruiting, and think about it, and I use Troy State as an example. Troy State probably is never going to play for the SBS championship. They're not going to be in the Sugar Bowl. They're not going to be in the Cotton Bowl. They're not going to play Georgia at the end of the day. I'm talking Troy State. So if Troy State is recruiting a kid, what are they telling that kid? Well, you come play for us, we win our conference, and we go to a bowl game at the end of the year. Well, either SWAC or MEAC team, that's what they should be telling the kid too. You come here, we win the championship, we go to a bowl game, we get paid, you get the whole experience. So I would much rather see us continue to compete in the Celebration Bowl, because I feel like it's more lucrative for the university.
Gotcha. That's in. I when I was typing this up, I never considered that aspect of it. That's a really, really good point. And really, aside from maybe 50 or 60 programs, even in FBS, pretty much all of them run at deficits. I mean, aside from the Power Five, like I guess there's 65 Power Five teams. Aside from those, I mean, most programs are running either at a deficit or barely breaking even and relying on TV money to pay for their day-to-day operations. That does make sense that that's a pretty big barrier.
Yeah, it's a pretty big barrier. I mean, again, you know, one of the problems I think that we run into, with HBCU football is that it's always being compared for whatever reason to Power Fives, right? And just like you just indicated, some of these some of these, the University of Alabama. I like to use Ohio State, and I like to use Penn State and Michigan. These are wealthy programs, right? These are wealthy programs. You know, they're making millions on top of millions, right? Nobody can compete with that. Nobody can compete with that. No, everybody, like you say, everybody's running a deficit trying to compete with that. And so, why put yourself in a position where you're going to actually run a deficit just so you can say that you're a part of the club? And I just think that makes no sense to me. It makes no sense to me personally.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so let's shift focus here a little bit. Deion Sanders. When the news broke, you had some pretty heated takes on it. In general, I tend to we view the world from different perspectives, but
Right.
I tend to agree with a lot of what you were saying. So when Deion Sanders first came to Jackson State, one of the first things he did was start insulting it. I mean, and that's how my memory serves me. Perhaps there's more to it than that. But first thing he did was come in and start talking about the facilities, start talking about this, start talking about that. Within the first few months, he said people broke in and stole his chain, stole this, stole that, and then one of the times it didn't end up being stolen; it was just misplaced. I don't know. To me, as a Florida fan, as a Florida student, if I had the most visible figurehead of my university and the first thing they did was start bashing it, it would piss me off. You don't have to be you don't have to excuse everything that's wrong. Sometimes wrongs need to be called out. But I thought that that was a pretty unprofessional, at a minimum, thing to do, to come in and kind of just start insulting people. And so, from your perspective as an HBCU fan, alum, former employee at an HBCU, you've lived and breathed this. What do you think the impact of? Do you think it's a net positive, a net negative? What are your sentiments on Deion Sanders?
I think, yeah, as you know, I'm a history guy, and I think that right now there's just so many different takes, right? It's like, yeah, he should have took the money. Start comparing money, start comparing facilities. I think when we look at the history, I think 5-10 years from now, when we look at the historical part and look at this from a historical perspective, I don't think it's going to be very kind to Deion Sanders. Because for the fact that the way that he portrayed himself, right? He came in as though I'm the savior, right? God called me, these are his words. God called me to come here to save my people, right? And he came as though he was the savior, and that he was going to be this this martyr. He was going to lift HBCUs up, and then he walked away from it. And so it's always going to be an incomplete. I think had he stayed for a few more years, I think he was going to made some real arguments for being, for laying down some sort of legacy at Jackson State, and maybe even for HBCU football overall. But I think that he chose money and he chose fame over a movement that could have taken Jackson State and maybe some other schools to the next level. So my take is that he came in, he pretended to be something that he really wasn't. He was just looking for opportunity to go elsewhere. And I wish him luck. I wish him a whole lot of luck at Colorado and in the Pac-12. But my overall feeling is that he used Jackson State to elevate himself falsely, and we can get into that because I don't really think that people realize that, in my opinion, that even though Deion recruited some great talent, he didn't have a great team. You can have Travis Hunter, right? You take Travis Hunter, but you lost in the Celebration Bowl with Travis
Twice.
Hunter. Twice.
Yeah.
You only beat. Think about it. People giving you talking about you got the number one FCS class of recruits, but you only beat SWAT schools, right? You didn't go out and play like fam. You went out and play the University of North Carolina, right? And compete, right? We don't know what they can do against top tier talent. We don't know. Even his first year, his full year, when they went to the Celebration Bowl. And fam, you went to the playoff. We played Southeast Louisiana. We got beat, right? But at least we were able to measure our program up against something other than a SWAT school or another HBCU.
Yeah.
Jackson State has never been able to do that. And again, you lose twice in the Celebration Bowl to a team that is lesser than didn't have a. Think about it. North Carolina Central and South Carolina State, they didn't have the benefit of getting 5 stars out of the transfer portal, right? They didn't have those. Those are high school players that beat him twice in the Celebration Bowl. So I don't know if Deion is really that impressive. Once you dive down into into the the data and the statistics of it. On surface it look good, but where's really the proof?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of that's I mean ditto. I mean that sums up my feelings exactly as well. Dion, he applied and interviewed for a bunch of jobs before. I don't want to say settle, but before he landed on Jackson State, and it was a 2 or 3 year process, right? Like it wasn't like he interviewed at a bunch of FBS schools, and nobody hired him, and then eventually he goes to Jackson State and does what he does there, and to me the persona that he had, right, kind of bringing me to my next point with Eddie Robinson Jr. um he ain't swag, right? And that's something that it's internet, social media, people all have takes on it, whatever. From my understanding, the people who attend HBCUs, the people who invest themselves into HBCUs, it is a lifestyle. Like it is a all or nothing. Like you're either one of us, and I don't even mean racially, right? Like I know plenty of white folks who went to HBCUs.
Right.
It's
You try to
cultural.
damn.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's cultural. It's HBCUs have had the deck stacked against them for most of their existence, and it's an area that everybody sticks together, and that's kind of what makes the Dion situation interesting because a rising tide lifts all ships, right? But from what I can tell, it seems like Dion's the only ship that really got lifted, and it throughout that whole process, much I mean, he's Deion Sanders, right? His whole thing is me, right? He's prime time. Look at me. I'm swag. I'm a dance. I got all this stuff. And so when that happened with Eddie Robinson Jr., um, yeah, it was kind of eye opening to me because I'm not SWAC, right? I'm not HBCU, but that was how I kind of felt about it. It was like he didn't go to an HBCU. He never cared about HBCUs until he got a job at one of them,
Right.
and now all of a sudden he's the face of HBCUs. And for me, it's like all of those coaches, and that was what I felt from Eddie Robinson's statement was, you have coaches who spend 50 years coaching at HBCUs and never leave because that's their lifeline. That's who they are. And then Deion Sanders comes in and he's supposed to represent all these folks with in year one when he's never been in that culture.
Yeah.
So tell me, what does it mean to be SWAC?
What I felt, and you laid it out eloquently when you said that it is a lifestyle for us, right? The same way that you got Gator Nation, and the same way that you got Knoll Nation, and you got Tide Nation. People live and breathe this, right? We're not short, we're not lacking fans, right? We're not lacking in those kind of areas. But what I thought about when I think about Eddie Robinson Jr. and his statement, uh, you know, yes, he didn't go graduate from the HBCU. No, he didn't come and he didn't play in the SWAC. But I thought it also touched on the fact that he just didn't come across as being genuine, right? There are many coaches who have coached in HBCU football who didn't go to HBCUs as well, right?
Mhm.
I'm thinking about Rob Broadway. I think he went to the university. If I'm not mistaken, I think he went to UNC and he graduated from UNC. But as you got down here, his A&T teams won 4 straight celebration bowls. That success that he brought to that program has propelled them now. They left the MEAC and they moved to the Big South, but now they're moving to the CAA. And their alumni are committing to a $80 to $1 million, $100 million capital campaign to fund their football program to elevate them. But Deion Sanders just didn't come off as being genius. Like he came off as an oil salesman. We could see it. Everybody could see it. You talk about his branding, right? I believe, right? That's his. When he recruits, he don't say, "Well, let's come play for Jackson State." Even now, he's not saying, come play at Colorado. He's saying come play for Prime. His
Mm-hmm.
assistant coaches are saying come play for Prime. Has nothing to do with Colorado, right? The only reason you know, because you know. And so I think his branding is, again, I'm not sure why they're letting that fly in Colorado. Maybe that's an agreement that they had, but I couldn't imagine him being in Florida State and saying come play for Prime, right? That's not how branding works. So
It's crazy to me because I have never once met a coach who would ever say to a player, it's about you, right? It's always we, us, the team together. And, you know, I, you know, I, maybe it's the current generation, out of these kids these days. I don't know. There's something that appeals about Dion. I think that there were definitely some NIL deals going on. There was definitely some money changing hands for Travis Hunter and probably Cormani McLean and Barstool Sports and Dion are like this. So they had something cooking up there.
yeah,
Um, but it that's my thing is when the coach is preaching me, it feels like a ticking time bomb, right? Like it feels like you bring enough of these people and players who are really only there for themselves, and when things blow up, I don't know. I mean, maybe he will be successful at Colorado. I, for one, am extremely glad that he is not at Florida when we went through our coaching surge. You know, I find it hard to believe that he's going to have much success at Colorado. Personally, maybe that's just the hater in me. I don't know. But it
but I
just
think it's
seems.
realistic, Ethan. I think it's realistic. Because again, go back. Let's go back again. Go back to the players that he's recruited. Don't get me wrong. He's had success recruiting, right? But again, it's apples and oranges. Where when you come to the SWAC and you got 5-star players, you got all these different type of players against 2 stars, no stars, right?
Mm-hmm,
But what happened when you line up against Oregon? What happened when you line up against even Stanford? What do you get when you line up against Stanford? You're getting 5-star for 5-star, 4-star for 4-star.
mm-hmm.
That's to me is going to be the tell of it. I don't know if he can win the Pac-12, but I don't know if he can be successful. But you got UCLA leaving and USC leaving.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe he can be successful there. But if he's not successful in his first 2 years, I'm thinking that I'm thinking that the media will stop paying attention, and kids are gonna stop paying attention.
Yeah, um, especially if he doesn't get guys to the league, right? Like Travis Hunter, Karate McLean, Kevin Coleman. These guys are top 50. Travis Hunter and Kamani McLean, hell, they're top 5 players in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Odds are, unless something drastic happens, they'll make it to the NFL, right?
Yeah.
But eventually, I'm the greatest cornerback of all time. Come play for me, I'll get you to the league. Well, you need more than corners to play football, right? And personally, Corey Raymond, he's the best cornerback coach of my lifetime, right? Like, look at the guys he's put in the league,
Right.
and he wasn't the best corner ever, right? Nick Saban wasn't the best safety ever, but he damn sure put safeties in the NFL. Yeah, and so I think it's going to be really interesting to watch that all unfold. Um, I I I don't have high hopes, but I've been wrong before.
Yeah.
Um, so let's go to Ed Reed. That was kind of an interesting situation. Um, Similar thing to where before he'd even signed his contract, he decided to go on social media and start blasting Bethune Cookman and all this stuff. And I saw the video of him in the golf cart with the players picking up trash, and I saw him in the locker room when they said they weren't going to honor his contract and all that stuff. What's your thoughts on that? What you think it's an overreaction? You think that he was in the wrong? What do you think?
Oh, I definitely think he was in the wrong. Of course, and I put on my administrative hat, right?
Mhm.
When I look at that. And my administrator has says that obviously you don't have a contract, which is not uncommon with college football coaches, but you don't have a contract. We are a Christian school, right? Bethune Cookman is a Christian school, but you produce a video, basically cursing it out. It's just not a good look. Um, at a top HBCU, what I consider a blue blood HBCU, one he would never would have got hired. But if he would have did that, he would have been gone that day. Like it wouldn't have been a week later. He wouldn't have been allowed to bring recruits on campus, and got rid of him. But I think that what you see with Ed Reed was this a direct result of Deion Sanders. He knew that we know that a school like Bethune Cookman is definitely going to have some challenges. And so, but when you look at the video and you look at what he did at the press conference, and I'm not sure if you had opportunity to watch his latest interview with Roland Martin, Ed Reed is not fit to be a head coach at any level. And I'm saying that because he seems to be very, very unstable. He seems to be very compulsive. And so things like that. So, at the end of the day, he had an opportunity. Bethune Cookman, just like the way Jackson State gave Deion an opportunity, no coaching experience. Let's see what we can do.
Mhm.
Let's celebrate you. You can maybe elevate our program some. He just dropped the bag, as the kids say. He dropped the bag on that.
Mhm.
But I think I'm glad that it happened. Because I would hate for Bethune Cookman to be stuck with him, for an entire season. It just would be tragic. It wouldn't be good for Bethune Cookman, and maybe not good for HBC football.
So, who would you consider the blue bloods of HBCUs? Give me a 5 to 10 school
I
list.
mean, of course, Florida A&M,
Of course.
Jackson State, Tennessee State, North Carolina A&T, Southern. I want to say Grambling, but Grambling really, really fell off. But that's mostly it. That's mostly it. Um, those are the schools. Those are the schools that have the most resources. And that's not saying a lot, right? But we
Mhm.
have more resources than most. But we also have, we have the pedigree. As you look at, as you are, on your graph, you mentioned, the 15 national championships by Florida A&M University, 16 by Tennessee State. Jackson State, as quiet as it kept, right? When you think about Jackson State has more, between Jackson State and South Carolina State, they have more NFL Hall of Famers than a lot of programs.
Mhm.
You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
So of course, you got to count those schools when you start talking about blue
I
blood.
mean, those three schools have more than Florida,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, um, that was one thing that surprised me. Another thing when I was putting some of this information together, um, HBCU. There were, as you can see at the bottom there were 33 players at the start of the 2022 season on rosters. South Carolina State with Darius Leonard, probably the best one out of the bunch. They
Mhm.
had 7. 2020 and 2021, there was only one player from HBCUs drafted. 2022, there were 4. So that's improvement, and that was something that Deion Sanders did right, in my opinion. I think that bringing some attention to the fact that HBCUs have, what I was getting at here is 34 NFL Hall of Famers. They have more than SEC, ACC, Pac-10, or Pac-12, whatever schools.
Mhm.
10% of the NFL Hall of Fame is made up of players from HBCU schools, but it's what 0.001% of players in the NFL are from HBCUs.
Yeah.
And I do think that it's a little bit of, part of it goes back to the origin and the purpose of HBCUs, right? A lot of those players were probably from times to where they couldn't go to other universities because of segregation.
Mhm.
But as time has shifted, and this is one of the dynamics maybe you could elaborate on a little bit. As time has shifted and we've gotten further and further away from integration, and obviously the black athlete makes up 70 to 80% of rosters, right?
Mm-hmm.
But why what can HBCUs do besides write a $10 million check, right? If we can make money fall out of the sky, we would. Aside from that, what can HBCUs do to keep some of the best African American talent in the country coming to them?
Here's the truth: we're not gonna be able to do. I mean, particularly in this atmosphere, when you're talking about NIL, right? When you're talking
Hmm.
about, who is this kid from Florida, right? That Florida reneged,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
you're talking $13 million.
yeah.
No, at FAMU, our athletic budget is $10 million.
Hmm.
See what I'm saying? I don't think we're gonna ever be able to compete with the very, very best, right? I mean, that's just nobody, and I mean
Hmm.
not because we're HBCU, just because that's the culture of college football, right?
Hmm.
The Detroit States and the South Floridas, then I mean FIU, Florida Atlantic,
Yeah,
they can't compete with them either.
yeah.
Um, and so I think that really, Ethan, I think we HBCUs need to figure out what path that we want to be on. I think that we have to be comfortable with who we are and what we bring to the table. Are we just, I think we can be, I would be comfortable with a HBCU championship game or playoffs. I would be comfortable with that. I would be comfortable not playing in the FCS playoffs. I would be comfortable not trying to go and be an SBS program,
Hmm.
because it just doesn't match. It doesn't match reality at this point for me. So I would like to see us improve our facilities. Um, I would like to see us, do take some advantage of the NIL and provide some NIL to some of our players. But beyond that, I just want us to be comfortable with what we do. We sell out stadiums. We draw on television, so we're doing all the great things. We just simply need to be comfortable with it. And if you had 10 HBCU graduates on here and you start talking about the Celebration Bowl and you start talking about the FCS playoff, man, it's straight war.
Really?
What I intended to do was put you in one of the SWAT groups so you could see what the conversations are like. Because I mean, it's a battle. It's a battle because there's a group of fashionable people who believe that we should be in the FCS playoff. I mean, there are people who simply bash the Celebration Bowl. I mean, some people don't even call it the Celebration Bowl. They call it the Chitlin Bowl. Right? And representing the Chitlin circuit. Like it's not legitimate. I mean, there are these people. I mean, it's a lot of conversation within the HBC world about what we should do. There's a lot of different ideas out there. But me personally, I think we just need to figure out what it is that we want to do. I like the idea of being FCS. Um, I would like for Tennessee State to join the SWAC, but they seem to want to go FBS, and that's fine. Um, but it's not much else we could do. Either, I don't think personally.
I mean, with the way things are changing and the direction we're heading, I mean, hell, HBCU might be the last bastion of college football as we know it. I mean, with the transfer portal and NIL and I am all for players getting paid. I'm all for players having I think it's absurd that a coach, a 55-year-old coach, can promise a 17-year-old boy, hey, you'll get XYZ if you come here. And then he comes there and he doesn't get XYZ. And then the coach says, oh, you need to change positions. Oh, you're on kickoff coverage.
Yeah,
And the only reason why the kid came there was because the coach told him he'd have a starting spot or he would be playing this position or whatever. And then he gets there and the NCAA says, no, you can't leave. I think that's absurd. Uh,
yeah,
the combination of NIL and transfer portal, it's just made it chaos, right? And so I mean, with the way things are looking, man, HBCU might be the truest form of college football that we'll have left soon because everybody else, FCS, you kill it at FCS, and now you're a senior and you're trying 5 school to get 1 year to get NFL tape. And I'm
yeah,
sure it happens at HBCU too, but it kind of they can make that jump from HBCU or SWAC or MEAC, and it's about on par with FCS, like you were saying.
Yeah.
But it's definitely an interesting combination of things there.
Yeah, one thing I will say about it, one thing I will say is that HBCU is in the landscape of college football. I do think that if SBCUs are the next niche market, right? Because we do sell our stadiums, right? I mean, we're not Florida State, Florida. We don't have 100,000 people in the stand, but 40 to 50,000 people. That's good.
Mhm.
Particularly when FCS. But think about it. You have to be a Troy State fan to go watch Troy State football, right? You have to be even North Dakota State.
Mhm.
That stadium only holds like 16,000 people.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's cold.
yeah, yeah. So my whole thing is that I think that people will watch HBCU football if it was given an option, if we had a bigger platform, which we in the works with that as well. I won't get into that because I'm not really versed on it. But we are a niche market, like the same way that the SEC, the Big Ten, and those are the two big conferences right now. Notre Dame football, the same way those things are niche markets. I think HBCUs could be the next because I don't see a Power Five that actually has a niche market. There's not an FCS program that has a niche market. And when I mean that, we could take most HBCUs could take their games anywhere and sell out. Like we go to Miami and sell out. Well, we don't sell out, but we have 40, 50,000. But that's in the
Mhm.
NFL stadium, right?
And I mean, y'all probably have more there than Miami fans.
Right. Exactly. That's true. Or when you look at Southern and Grambling, you got 60,000 people in the Superdome.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. If what's the name of that rivalry between those two? Um,
It's called the Bayou
it's
Classic.
some Bayou Classic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whenever I see that on TV, I'm watching it. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't have any rooting interest in either one of those teams, but I know it's gonna be good football, and you guys obviously FAMU, but Southern and Grambling, y'all got the band. Yeah, that is something that when I took my wife and daughter to their first game in Florida, that was their favorite part, right?
Yeah.
Like that's something that you don't need to. I know it sounds kind of silly talking about this on a football show, but that is something that can draw in more casual. Like you're talking about a niche market, that's something that can draw people in. Is you want to see good football and you want to see some entertainment. Like I don't want to watch 25 commercials during halftime. Let me watch kids who are literally living their dream right now, right? Like the football players living their dream playing college football, the drum major living their dream, the dancers, the baton twirlers, the band, everybody is doing exactly what they've always wanted to do.
Wow.
They're not thinking about going to the NFL. They're not thinking about what NIL. They're thinking about being a college kid. And as I've gotten older, as college football has kind of spiraled out of control a little bit, it's the little stuff like that, man, that makes me remember what it was like to be in college. That makes me want to enjoy that stuff. And that's something that HBCUs for sure have the market cornered on.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever going to be able to stand up to you guys in that stuff.
Yeah.
And that's something that, like you were saying, if it were marketed and it were something that you got a broader and a bigger spotlight for, it definitely could grow the entire branding of HBCUs entirely.
Yeah. I agree. I tell you what, next football season, and that football schedule hasn't come out yet, but I gotta invite you and your family to a game, and then we can come back and have another conversation about HBC football in the fall.
I would love that. I would
Yeah.
love that.
Okay. All right, man.
All right, man. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for us. You got anything else you want to throw out here?
Not I enjoy it. Not that I know that you have a podcast, man. You can bring me back on as a regular. I can talk about regular football too.
All right, all right.
So bring me back, man. I would love to be a part of it, man.
We're right now. Next week we are going to be talking SEC softball. and
Okay.
then the week after that we're going to be doing SEC baseball. But we try, it's an my co-host is a Texas A&M fan. I'm a Florida fan. We try to cover all the different teams. A lot of my buddies, they don't give two craps about the other sports. I am a sports fanatic, so I don't care if it's gymnastics, soccer, tennis, whatever. I care about it, and I want to see this logo winning. And so I'm going to use my platform to talk about whatever I can when it comes to the Florida Gator sports.
But
But yeah,
next
man,
week
this
is national signing though, Ethan.
well, that. So what it is Shelbie has some Texas A&M softball players. I think she has two of them that are going to come on to the show with us.
Okay.
So maybe we'll split it up and do National Signing Day at the second half and do the softball at the first half. That's her thing. This was my special edition. That's going to be her special edition. We got to take turns.
All right.
But yeah, man, for sure. I would love to have you back on here sometime. Doesn't need to be a special edition. We welcome guests. We'll definitely have you back on again sometime soon.
All right, man. Hey, man. Good looking out, Ethan. I enjoyed it. SEC Nation, thanks for having me. Again, I'll check out another time.
Yes, sir. You have a good night.
You too.